Why don't you talk to your family? It all started the day my older brother measured us both against the kitchen wall and saw I was 2 inches taller. He grabbed my shoulders hard enough to bruise. You need to stop growing right now because there's no way my little brother is going to be taller than me. I thought he was joking, but his face stayed deadly serious as he shoved me against the wall. I've been the tall one in this family for 23 years, and you're not changing that now just because you hit some freak growth spurt at 19. You realize I can't control how tall I grow, right? I asked, still thinking this had to be some weird prank. Then you better figure out how to control it because if you keep growing, I'm going to make your life so miserable you'll wish you were born without legs, he said, and our mom walked in just as he was shoving me hard enough to dent the drywall. 2 weeks later, he called a family meeting where he brought pamphlets about height reduction surgeries and demanded our parents pay for me to get my legs shortened. He had researched doctors in Brazil who would remove sections of my femurs and tibias to make me 4 inches shorter, complete with recovery timelines and testimonials from people who'd had the procedure for medical reasons. Our dad literally asked if he needed psychiatric help, while our mom just stared at him like she didn't recognize her own son. The family therapist he'd somehow convinced to attend told him that his request was not only unreasonable, but potentially criminal if he tried to force it, and my brother stormed out screaming that we'd all regret taking my side when I ended up ruining his life by being taller. I thought it was over, until he showed up at my college graduation wearing these massive platform shoes that had to be at least 6 inches tall. He marched right up to the stage as I was getting my diploma and announced to everyone that he was still the tallest sibling in our family, holding his arms up like he'd won something while wobbling on these ridiculous shoes. Then he tried to stand next to me for the official photos and fell straight off the platforms in front of hundreds of people, landing so hard that everyone heard the crack when his ankle twisted the wrong direction. But instead of going to the hospital, he started injecting himself with black market human growth hormone right there on the graduation lawn, pulling syringes from his pockets and stabbing them into his thighs while screaming that he'd grow 6 inches in 6 hours. His girlfriend tried to stop him, but he'd already injected 12 doses when he started convulsing, and his bones actually began stretching audibly, making these horrible popping sounds that made people vomit. He hung himself upside down from the graduation arch while his body seized from the hormones, saying gravity would help distribute the growth, and his spine started elongating so fast that his skin split open along his back. He stayed up there for 8 hours injecting more hormones every 30 minutes while blood dripped from the tears in his skin, and when paramedics tried to get him down, he climbed higher and tied weights to his ankles to stretch faster. His body went into shock when his organs couldn't keep up with his skeleton expanding, and he finally had a heart attack and fell 20 feet onto concrete, his bones having grown so rapidly and unevenly that his skeleton had literally deformed into something that barely looked human anymore. The doctor said the growth hormone overdose had caused his bones to grow in random directions, fusing joints at wrong angles and giving him a permanent hunched shape that actually made him 3 inches shorter than before. Plus, he'd need dialysis for life because his kidneys had failed trying to process all the hormones. When I visited him in the ICU where machines were keeping him alive, he looked at me from his bed with his twisted body barely recognizable. "You did this to me by growing taller and making me feel like I had to compete," he said, while our mom held his malformed hand. "I'm permanently disfigured because you couldn't just stay shorter than your big brother like you're supposed to be. You injected yourself with enough growth hormone to kill a horse," I said, but our mom shushed me and said this wasn't the time. "If you had just stopped growing when I asked, I wouldn't need dialysis 3 times a week for the rest of my life," he continued, and our dad actually nodded like this made sense. I sat alone in my apartment afterward while my family rallied around my brother, everyone sharing how brave he was for surviving such a tragedy. The comments all asked what kind of monster would drive their own brother to inject himself with experimental hormones until his skeleton deformed, and I watched his GoFundMe donation counter hit 6 figures while people called me a sociopath for being tall. My family posted daily updates about his surgeries to straighten his twisted bones, and every single post mentioned how this never would have happened if his younger brother hadn't destroyed his identity. 3 weeks later, the sheriff knocked on my door with an arrest warrant, and my own parents had signed the criminal complaint. Full story on the channel below.